You're listening to the Connecticut Real Estate Edge podcast, your source for tips and tricks on building wealth through real estate in Connecticut. You will get the best techniques from leading local experts in real estate and lending. Now, here's your host, Robert Weinberg.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Connecticut Real Estate Edge. I want to bring your attention to an amazing guest that we have today, Mr. Joel Friedland of Brit Properties. Joel, thank you for joining us.
It's great to see you, Robert.
Thank you. So the reason that I wanted to bring Joel on is because Joel is a true pioneer and an expert specifically in the niche of industrial real estate. And on the podcast, we've really focused on residential real estate, multifamily real estate, and buying your first property. But I want to take it a step further because a lot of us out there, we've got a property or a couple. We've done the residential thing. We're trying to move up through the ranks. And in commercial real estate, especially right now in 2024, there's a huge motivation to be working in the industrial space. It's one of the real winners in commercial real estate right now that we're not seeing in other asset classes within real estate. So Joel's the perfect guy to have on. He's an expert in the space. So we're going to be talking today about industrial real estate and how you as a first-time or new real estate investor can get involved in industrial real estate. Okay, so to start out, Joel, what I want you to talk to us about is insights, the current state of industrial real estate in America, and what is the potential for first-time or newer real estate investors?
Sure. So industrial is incredibly hot. Right now, I am looking at a market where in certain places, the vacancy factor is 0. Nothing available for sale. Now, leasing's different. There are literally billions of square feet of industrial all around the United States. And there are hundreds of thousands of buildings. It's sort of like hidden behind other things. It's like behind shopping centers, behind residential areas, or just in big open areas that are industrial parks. The reason it's been so hot is because the internet has changed the world. People order their products, whether it's food, whether it's clothing, any personal product, any business product, online. And anyone who orders online, the product comes from an industrial building. So, for example, you drive along any highway near where you live, and you're going to see these giant buildings, like Amazon might occupy some of them, right? It's really not all about Amazon, although that's what people talk about. It's also about manufacturing. Every single thing that you interact with goes through an industrial building, whether it's the food on your table, because all food companies have industrial buildings where they manufacture the food and distribute the food, or whether it's something in your office. I'm looking at your background there. Every book was made in an industrial building. Every part of your iPhone was made in an industrial building. All the components of your computer, every component of a car, every component of a truck, of a train, of an airplane. Industrial has always been there, but nobody ever heard of it until recently, because now every pension fund and every investor that knows real estate says, wow, you're an industrial? When I first started, when I was in my early 20s, now I'm in my mid 60s, I'd say I'm in industrial real estate, and people would look at me and go, what's that? They had no idea what it meant.
So what I'm hearing from you is that industrial real estate could almost be called like e-commerce real estate or commerce in general, because everything's running through there. And with the advent of technology, Amazon, eBay, all these e-commerce conglomerates, right? Everything's going through these industrial buildings. There's more need today. There's more demand for industrial real estate today than there was 10 years ago. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and the word that is used most often is logistics. It's logistics real estate or supply chain. That's another
there we go.
way to phrase it.
So that's very clear that this is an asset class that's more in demand now and growing, right? As we continue to put more commerce online, people do more and more of their purchasing through the internet, more and more industrial real estate is going to be needed to meet that need. So with that said, you had mentioned, people confused about it, misconceptions. Can you speak to some of the biggest myths and misconceptions that you hear out there about industrial real estate that stops people from maybe looking closer at it?
Yeah, it's in the category of commercial real estate. Commercial real estate can be a number of things. It can be restaurants, it can be stores, it can be malls, it can be industrial, it can be office. And because retail has been struggling, especially malls,
Mm-hmm.
because of the internet, and because office buildings have been struggling because people work from home due to the fact that they can do what you and I are doing right now and be on a Zoom, there's a lot of empty space. So the misconception is that all commercial is in trouble. The one area of commercial that I can tell you is not in any trouble is industrial. Rents are up 75% from 4 years ago, and values of buildings are up 80% from 4 years ago. The rents haven't quite kept up with the sale values. The sale values have been nuts. So if you're looking to buy an industrial building, good luck. There aren't any. There's nothing for sale. When something comes for sale, if it's a decent building and it's priced right, bam, sells right away.
Okay. So I know your approach. You've been doing industrial for decades. You know the business. You have an approach that's different than a lot of others in commercial real estate and in industrial. And it's a debt-free approach that you take, right? So can you speak to the approach that you take versus your competitors, others in the space? Why do you feel the debt-free approach is so important? Can you elaborate on the benefits to people that are investing with you?
Sure. So I don't own any of our buildings. We have a portfolio of 19 buildings. I don't own any of them outright. I don't own any of them myself. From the very beginning, I was mentored early on by a family that owned 84 industrial buildings where I live in Chicago, and they taught me the business. And I learned that syndication is a really good thing. This was a very wealthy family. They owned buildings with dozens and dozens of investors that they had brought in from the outside. And when they taught me how to do syndication, they invested with me, and I brought in a lot of investors from the outside. So I bought 100 industrial buildings over the years since the early 1990s, actually since the late 1980s. And my 100 buildings have all been bought with investors who put in anywhere from $20,000 to as much as $1 million. And they're called either limited partners or members, which is in an LLC or a limited liability company. They're not partners, they're members. It's just a technical thing for the law. So in all of my deals, I have anywhere between 30 investors and 100 investors. I actually have a number of properties with 100 separate investors, each one who put in, let's say, 25,000, 50,000, 100,000. And what I love about that is I can raise the money instead of going to the bank. And what I love about that is if I have no bank, there's never an issue of foreclosure, and I have the ultimate in staying power. Now, because I'm not using leverage, it does drive down the returns because you don't get that benefit of a multiplier. If you borrowed 75% and put down 25%, you could make 4 times more money in profit than in all cash. But I've been through 4 downturns, and they were hell. Robert, they were hell, especially 2008. And everybody lost money in 2008. Maybe some exceptions, very few. I think almost everyone lost money, at least on paper. And I had a struggle. It was horrible. And I had to explain to my group of investors why things weren't what they used to be. You know, your property's not worth as much as you put into it, and the cash flow distributions are stopping. In all cash, the cash flow doesn't stop. Interest rates, we don't give a crap. There are no interest rates because we buy straight.
Well, the interest rate is zero because there is no cost to that money. And I want to just stop you for a second because the stuff you're talking about here is something that we've covered, we've talked about, done entire episodes here about real estate syndication and real estate crowdfunding. And real estate crowdfunding is really just a new age, modern way of saying real estate syndication. As you're alluding to, real estate syndication, which is pooling money from a bunch of different investors, that has been around as long as real estate's been around, right? This is not a new thing. What's new is bringing it online, letting the average Joe get involved, or I should say average accredited investor, I would assume in your case. So for all of our listeners that are wondering, how can they get involved in industrial real estate? We can cut to the chase by saying there's opportunity where you don't have to source your own deals. You don't have to find the property. You don't have to run the numbers. You can let experienced people do that, much like Joel and his team, and then get in on that with them as an investor, as someone in their portfolio who's involved. As you mentioned, amounts as little as 20, 25,000. Think about that. Where can you get involved in a multi-million dollar, sometimes maybe even a like 8-figure type of deal with 20, 25, 30, 40, $50,000? You can't do it. You can't. And that's why this is my preferred method. Okay. That's why I've embraced the real estate syndication, the real estate crowdfunding for so long. It's the only way I've been able to get involved in this industrial, hotel, some of these huge apartment buildings. I have no knowledge in that. I have no experience in that. But aligning with someone like Joel in these areas, that's the power of real estate syndication. So I think that's the perfect segue for the rest of our episode, where I want to talk about working with you, getting in the trenches with industrial real estate. So rather than talking about where you find deals and all that, if somebody's going to partner with an experienced syndicator like yourself in the industrial space, what should they be looking for? What should they be assessing? How do they know they've got the right partner? Because they're going to be offloading their cash to you and entrusting you and your team to manage that money, in using this syndication.
Yeah, so there's really two things. One is the sponsor. That's the syndicator who takes responsibility for finding the deal, buying the deal, and then syndicating the deal and then managing it after that. So that's an incredibly important part of it, is finding the person or the company that puts those deals together. The second one, which is not as important as the first one, is finding a deal, finding a building to buy. And so in my case, we would usually be asked a lot of questions by an investor about who we are, what our experience is. What the smart investors ask the toughest questions, always. You know that, and I know that. If there are a bunch of softball questions, someone giving their money to someone that they've asked softball questions to, they don't really know the answers to what the major risks are. So I would say, ask the sponsor, what are the major risks in investing with you? And I can tell you what the top 3 are, really simply. And by the way, I have an article on my website called Why You Should Not Invest With Us, and it has all of the reasons that I could possibly think of that you wouldn't invest, and the questions to ask. But there are really 3 main questions. 1, succession plan. You don't want to invest with someone who's a guy who doesn't have people on the bench behind him. You would never want to own a baseball team where there was one player. You got to have a bunch of people on the bench. So there's a backup catcher, there's many pitchers. And so that's one thing that we have, is we've got a lot of experience, but we have people that if I was walking and I tripped over my desk and I fell down and bumped my head and I died, who takes over? And it's not always clear. And not only that, it's not always in writing between the people who own it and the people who will take over in the succession plan. That's the most important thing. The second most important thing is, what were your losses and how did you handle them? And if someone says, I've never had any losses, don't walk.
They don't have much experience then.
Run, because everyone has had a bad deal. Again, getting back to baseball, if a baseball player came to you and said, I've never struck out, you'd say, liar, 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 liar. There's strikeouts. It happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way it works. Every deal can't be a great deal.
Yep.
So that's the second question. What are your worst deals? And the next one is, give me the structure of your deals. What do you get as the sponsor, and what do I get as the limited partner? How do we split the cash flow and the profits? And we're all about cash flow. With no debt, we like to give people 8% cash flow. That's what we look for in deals.
Mm-hmm.
So the investors get usually what's called a preferred return. That's the normal structure. They get 8% on their money every year, year in and year out. And then if there's a profit, the investors get 80% of the profit, and the sponsor, the syndicator, gets 20%. Sometimes that formula is different with different sponsors. And that's the question, because there are sponsors who I think are the most greedies of anybody. And they structure it where unsuspecting limited partners don't get it, but they might be splitting 50-50 right out of the gate. If it's printed in the offering book and it's disclosed, you can make any deal.
Yep.
Just because it's written in a book or something that you send somebody by email, it doesn't mean it's fair or that it's market.
But what I'm hearing you say is, before you get to the property, the most important thing is the sponsor. And I completely agree with you, because you could have the best property in the world, the best deal structure in the world, but if you don't have the right sponsor managing that, putting that whole thing together, boots on the ground, so to speak, then it can be a nightmare. It really can. So I will just second that, but as we move towards wrapping up our conversation, can you talk a little about advice for first-time investors that are hearing this going, this sounds good. I want to move into industrial real estate, or I want to move into syndication to build my wealth in my portfolio. What are just some straight out of the gate tips and advice you'd give to someone with those thoughts right now?
Number one, find a mentor, someone who's done it over and over and over again, who's super experienced, who's willing to take you under their wing, and work for free if you have to. I've got a guy who called me. He wanted to learn my business. He says, I'll work for free for you for a month. Teach me everything you know. And I'll put in so much time and effort that I'll be like a $10,000 a month employee. And so my free work is like me paying tuition. And I'm paying tuition by working for free. And you're getting $10,000 worth of my service. And guess what? He continued working for me after the month and still does, and has learned a ton. And now he gets paid. I figured out how great he was. So that is if there's any one thing, find somebody in the business and wrap your arms around them and don't let them go till you suck every bit of information right out of their brain. That's the number one thing. Number two, pick a market. Do it somewhere and don't be all over the place. Being all over the place geographically is really stupid for new people. I've heard people say, yeah, I bought a building when I was in Fort Knox, and I bought a building when I was in San Diego. These great military people, they hear, buy something in each place where you're stationed. I don't agree with that. They should find one place and be an expert there, because if you go around doing things in different markets when you're new, there's a bunch of people who've been there like I have for 4 decades. They're going to eat your lunch. You're going to make mistakes. You can't learn a market unless it's teeny tiny. And if it's teeny tiny, the problem is it's hard to own a building in a teeny tiny market because there aren't that many tenants.
And I would say if you're someone looking to invest geographically diversified, which I've done, I have properties all over the country, but I never lived there. I never took direct ownership. So that's where, again, syndication, that comes in. Partner with the #1 industrial real estate guy in San Diego. Partner with one of the top self-storage syndicators in New York State. Pick your area, pick your asset class, go find the team that's going to back you. Go find who you're going to entrust your capital with. And then if you want to go out and do it yourself and all that, you'll have a little bit of experience and a little bit of relationship under your wing. Because I'm sure if one of your investors came to you that had been in a few of your syndication and a few of your buildings and said, hey, I have a question, or I'm looking to buy this, like, you're going to be a lot more apt to talking to them and mentoring them at that point versus somebody calling you or emailing cold off the street, hey, I want to get into this. So, I personally did the syndication because of issues with time and geography and then money, because again, you could, with a certain amount, limited money, you can't get into a $10 million building, even a $2 million building, if you only have 20, 30, 50,000, right? With this crowdfunding and syndication, you could take 50,000 and maybe even get into more than one deal, right? Maybe even two or maybe even three. But it's like, I love that diversity. I love the ability to use syndication to really amplify returns in the portfolio and create that stable cash flow. So I don't want to scare people that you can't invest in Milwaukee if you live in Miami, but you got to create that conduit. Who is the expert helping you to invest there so that you're not making big mistakes? Yeah, you're going to have to give up a little bit of your profit, but that's entry level in real estate. Whoever's helping you is going to make money. Be comfortable with that, because you could be that person making money 10, 20 years from now, helping others, right?
Got one for you. One of my deals, I told the guy who lives in Missouri about my deal, and I knew him. And he said, I'm going to come into Chicago where the deal's located. I want you to give me a tour of all your buildings so I can see what you got, including the one that I'd be investing in. And he and his wife came in, and my wife and I, and he and his wife had dinner. And we went on a tour, a nighttime tour, but we could see buildings, to show him the building he'd be investing in and the other ones that we own. And it was fantastic. He absolutely loved it. And he came into my next deal also and was in Chicago to look at that deal. We drove to the buildings and we looked at them. And so, for an airplane flight, if you want to really know your syndicator, you can get on an airplane for $100 and land and get picked up and look at buildings for a day, have lunch together, and then make a decision.
I agree with you. And I also think the relationship is important. So I have certain syndicators that I've worked with on 3, 4, 5 deals because they treat me right. They do the right thing. They know what they're doing. They're really, really good. So when they come across with another deal, it's not really a matter of if we're going to invest. It's more a matter of how much, right? Because they have that track record of success. And I know that a lot of our listeners are looking to real estate as a passive income source, and using syndication, it can be retirement income. It can supplement your working income. It can help you create passive income to be able to do other things with, so that you're not constantly working for money. So as that said, Joel, a lot of people are probably wondering, how can they get involved with your next project? They want to get in industrial. Maybe they have questions. Maybe they want to come meet with you. Can you give some contact info, websites, emails? How can people get in touch?
Yeah, the best way is our website is called Brit Properties, BRIT with 1T properties.com. And just so you can remember why we named it Brit, we sold our old company in 2014. I built up a bigger company and sold it with a group of my partners. And we had to start a new company. And I started over, and our property manager's name was Brad. We loved Brad. And so we came up with the name Brad Really Is Terrific, BRIT.
Nice, easy and simple. So just have them reach out via your website then, that has all your contact info. They can go on there. So for those of you with a real open mind right now that are motivated and confident that you want to move into commercial real estate, and more specifically industrial real estate, hopefully our episode today has given you motivation, it's given you confidence, and it most importantly has given you the resources that you need to move into that. And I know that Joel and his team at Brit Properties, they're at the top of their game. So I'm very comfortable saying that if you're investing in industrial, make contact with them, see if they're a good fit for you, see if, it jives, right? Because this is not a 2-week thing here. This is something that's going to be, hey, we want to do this. This is like several years, right? That it's going to be. These aren't like flips where you're giving your money on January and you're getting it back in December. 3 to 5 years generally minimum, right? These aren't like short-term opportunities. So because it's more long-term, you got to be comfortable with the person, the team that you're working with. And you've got the track record, Joel. So I just want to encourage everyone to reach out to you. And for everyone that is hearing us today, thank you for taking the time out to listen. I hope we've given you that information that you need to move forward with your real estate goals. Joel, thank you for your time. And we'll see everyone on the next episode. Take care.
Thanks for listening. If you have questions about the information we've covered or would like to discuss mortgage financing for your situation, you can reach Robert Weinberg by visiting www.robgw.com.